Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to talk about the frustration with this 8-10 Timberwolves team, where we're sitting right now, some perspective on it, and why the next couple of home games here against the Clippers and Lakers are just so important. We'll also look at the the Wolves-Clippers matchup for tonight. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Happy Timberwolves game day. And hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving. It was a nice, to be honest, a nice NBA reprieve. Just, be thankful, hang out with family, watch football, and, a one-day break after a terror. It would have been a lot more fun if the Wolves had won Tuesday or Wednesday, or at least not lost in the fashion that they did. But here we go, back at it tonight, Friday night, Black Friday at Target Center. Hopefully folks will be ready to go and the vibes will be a lot more positive. We're going to talk about those vibes today on the show. The frustration that's not just palpable, but is it's tangible, right? It's real. It's a real thing. The boos at Target Center, the Anthony Edwards comments following the loss on Wednesday night. So I want to talk a bit about that. And also acknowledge it, give some perspective, and then talk about the schedule right now, what's going on with the Wolves. Why are these games so important? Besides the fact that they're now on the outside looking in if the playoffs started today, which is absurd because they're 18 games in, but that whole thing, right? They're 13th in the West or something like that. So some perspective and context. Then we'll talk about the Wolves-Clippers matchup for tonight too. So a lot to get to on the show. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder about the daily newsletter as well. You can head to LockedOnDaily.com and subscribe now for a one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage that's delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now, LockedOnDaily.com. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Okay, let's talk about the Anthony Edwards comments after the latest loss on Wednesday. Ant criticized everybody. I don't think he really specifically criticized the coaching staff. I think he actually made a comment about how the coaches are putting them in a good position to succeed, but criticized himself, his teammates, criticized the fans, of course, which of course is a always controversial move by any player. Although I will say it was a little bit different context. Remember when D'Lo did that 3 years ago and then asked the fans to, that's when the whole standing until the team scores thing started, which a lot of other teams do. OKC's done it forever. That's just a different world, the Thunder fans, for a lot of reasons. But it was a bit of a different tone and vibe, and obviously a different caliber of player coming from D'Lo versus Anthony Edwards, but similar sentiment, right? So anyway, that's what Ant said. And on the one hand, I get it because I'm not going to tell any fan how they should think or feel or react to anything, because that's not my job. That shouldn't be anybody's job. Anybody can think or feel how they want about the situation. But I'm going to call it like I see it. I get it. There's plenty of markets where fans boo their teams. It feels like almost every game, right? Obviously Philadelphia, right? That happens. That's how it also happens more in other sports, I think, than the NBA. It's a pretty unusual thing for Timberwolves fans, I think, I should say for Minnesota fans, period. But again, every sport is a little bit different. The fan base, the crowd for a certain sport is a bit different. I get it from a player perspective, because in his mind, he's thinking you're supposed to be supporting us. But I also get it from the fan perspective in the sense that if you feel like the team's not giving you 100% and you paid money to be at the game, you have a right to be upset with it. And people may displayed in different ways. Like personally, if I'm at the game as a fan, I'm probably not booing because I just don't think that's helpful. Because if you're like, there's so many different layers to this, right? I'm not going to get into the business side of the ticket prices, et cetera, but that's obviously something that needs to be acknowledged. But the players don't care about that. Like that, they're not thinking about that while they're playing basketball, right? Like, so for me, I would parse those things and I would say, look, I'm disappointed with the team's play on the court. I maybe wouldn't express it by booing, but like if somebody else wants to boo, fine. That's their right to do it. They bought the ticket for to come to the game. They can do that. And I get the sentiment, right? Watching it on TV, I have that same thought. Like, if you feel like the effort's not 100%, then that there's a perfectly reasonable reason to be upset as a fan, even if they are given 100%. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody how they should think or feel or react to this team. So I get it from Ant's perspective too, right? Because he's thinking we're here, we should be getting support while we're going through this rough patch. And sure enough, like he called the players themselves front runners, and he was referencing, I think, kind of lumping the fans into that group too, because there were boo birds in the second quarter. And then when this team had the comeback and they were up 8 with 3 minutes left on Wednesday night, everybody's cheering, everybody's hyped. And Ant's point with the team was when we were losing, everyone was sat on the bench and sitting and not getting excited. And then as soon as the team starts getting up, guys are standing and they're cheering and they're supporting their teammates after a made basket, a dunk, or a three or whatever. And Ant's point is that support should be there regardless. Now, obviously, there's going to be better vibes when you're winning than when you're losing. But the point is you need some of those vibes to help pull you out of the in-game slump, or in this case, the more macro slump over the course of that the Wolves have now been in, frankly, for the first 18 games of the season, the first almost quarter of the season. So all of Ant's points are valid. Now, obviously, the team goes as he goes to an extent, and he needs some more consistency, and he acknowledged that. Like, he didn't, if you only read the clips of what he said, don't miss that he also criticized himself. Now, will he respond? That's the question. And the Timberwolves, like, thankfully, there's two more home games here before the Wolves go back out on the road. So they get a chance to right the ship at home. And we'll talk more about this from a schedule standpoint against teams that they should beat. I know they have worse records than the Lakers and Clippers, but teams that they should beat. And it's not like they have to go out on the road, try and figure it out, and then come back, to Target Center where the vibes were really wonky and off. They get a chance to hopefully win Friday, take 2 days off again, win Monday, go back out on the road with good vibes, be at 500, heading into a tough stretch, and hopefully, again, with the good vibes at Target Center, feel a lot better about where things are sitting at. From a strictly basketball standpoint, I covered a lot of this on Thursday's show, the postgame pod after Wednesday night's loss, but it's consistency. It really is. And like, don't look now, but this team's defense is now ranked ahead of their offense. And a week and a half ago, we were talking about how this defense was like bottom half of the league. The offense was actually top 10. Well, now it's flipped, and the defense is like 12th, 13th in the league. The offense is like 15th, 16th in the league, which is more in line with what you'd expect. But it also underscores that the defense can be really good. Remember that third quarter they had the other night when they were getting back into the game? I think that was Tuesday's game. And it legit looked like last year's defense, flying around, crisp rotations, Xing out on the perimeter, low man stepping up, covering for each other, using their length, athleticism, youth, etc., to do all of the above. And then it, of course, went away. Actually, that was Wednesday's game, because then it went away down the stretch for the most part. And then I actually thought defensively was decent down the stretch against the Kings. The Kings made some crazy shots, De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk especially. But again, it's the consistency. Like, we shouldn't have to point to one quarter or a 10-minute stretch and say, man, the defense was great then. It should be the opposite. It should be the defense is great most of the time, and there's a little rough patch, but they figured it out, sort of a thing, right? Like, that's what we had last year, was there were full games where the defense was like that, or majority games where the defense was like that they would still win. And now, it's the opposite. It's, we have to hunt for, hey, this was a really good moment in the game, because it's not consistent in any way. Okay, I want to get into the upcoming schedule, why this is so important. Doing less X's and O's here today, because we covered so many games this week that we covered that in the wake of. But I want to talk about some of these upcoming matchups more broadly and why this stretch of the season is important. Talk about some of the bigger picture numbers for the Wolves, and then we'll get into the Wolves-Clippers matchup. So we'll do it here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Skylight Frames. Look, it's the holiday season now. Is there someone that you really want to celebrate with and stay connected to who lives far away? I know I'm in this boat, originally from Minnesota, of course, don't live there currently. My wife and I, we have plenty of family at home in Minnesota that we miss during the holiday season, but we want to feel like they're part of our festivities from afar. If your loved ones live far away and you just wish that they could be close to you, well, guess what? We got the perfect gift idea for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame that your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's extremely easy to use. Setup takes less than a minute. Invite your friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or via email with no account or subscription required. It's an absolute seamless sharing experience. You can add new photos straight from your phone from anywhere. It just takes a tap on your phone. You can send new photos to a frame across the country. It's the fastest, easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel a lot more connected to you. Plus, it looks beautiful in your home. Your photos are displayed in HD resolution. You can choose from 5 different frame styles. You can set it up in portrait or landscape mode. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NBA. That's Skylight Frame, SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NBA. Get $20 off your purchase right now at skylightframe.com/NBA. All right. Let's talk about why these next couple of games are so important. And I'll get specifically into the Clippers matchup here in the next segment. But in short, these games are about as winnable as it's going to get in the near term for Minnesota. First of all, there's the obvious. The Wolves have lost 7 of 9 games. And I've said this a bunch this week. I'll say it again. They've lost 4 games in a row. That never happened last year. It's the first time, say it a couple different ways, the first time this calendar year the Timberwolves have lost 4 straight games. It's the first time, they never did it last year, regular season. Remember, regular season last year, they never lost more than 2 in a row. They never had a 3-game losing streak. And they did it twice in the playoffs, of course, against Denver, the second round. Ultimately, they win that series. They did it against Dallas, games 1, 2, and 3 of the conference finals before winning game 4, and then, of course, losing game 5. Never did they lose 4 games in a row last season. The first time this calendar year, and of course, the first time then that they've lost 7 out of 9 games. And remember, mixed in there, they barely beat the Kings, and they beat the Suns on that Randle buzzer beater. Now, you could look at the flip side and say, look, they barely lost to the Heat, obviously a shorthanded Heat team. They could have beaten the Celtics if that buzzer beater goes down from Nas. The Raptors and Rockets games were close. The Kings game, they were up. None of these games are really blowouts either way, except for one of those Blazers games, which was brutal. But they're in all of these games, right? Which isn't, I'm not at all silver lining this, right? Like, there's no excuse to losing twice to the Blazers and, losing to the Raptors and losing to the shorthanded Heat and losing 7 of 9, period, if you're a team that wins the conference finals. I'm not at all making an excuse. I'm just saying they're close. In a sense, even if the vibes are off. But they've lost 4 in a row. They've lost 7 of 9. They have these next 2 games at home, 2 games in 4 days. They get 2 days off, 2 days of rest in between. And then they go out on a 3-game road trip. And then you have that the week where we don't know the schedule yet because it's the NBA Cup semifinals and finals, which, of course, the Wolves are eliminated from that contention. Although tonight is a cup game, by the way, for whatever that's worth against the Clippers. It's not worth much at this point, except for the court will be different. The court will be the green court from Tuesday. You get that weird week where we don't know who they're going to play yet. And then the schedule's not very forgiving for the rest of this calendar year either. So these games are super important. This Clippers game at home Friday. They get the Lakers on Monday. Of course, they lost the Lakers in opening night. The Lakers have been struggling of late after, having a great start to the season. Both very winnable games. Both games they're going to be favored in. Both teams they should beat. Then next Wednesday, they start their West Coast road trip by going to see the Clippers, which of course is winnable, but it's also on the road. And the Clippers are, still a good team. And then you have 2 straight games at Golden State, Friday and Sunday with the day off in between. Golden State's been awesome this season. Then you get that weird week in between. And then they come back home to take on Karl Anthony Towns and the Knicks on December 19th. Cats return to Target Center, which is going to be a ton of fun. And here's hoping the vibes are better by then, because otherwise, look, I'm not going to turn this into a Cat Randle thing or a Cat trade thing at this moment. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that. But I didn't like the trade in the moment. I don't like Julius Randle's fit in Minnesota. I didn't like it when it happened. I don't like it now. But I'll actually feel bad for Julius Randle that night if this team's below 500 and Cat comes to town with the Knicks. Now, the Knicks haven't been as good record-wise as people expected either. They've had a disappointing start to the season, but Cat's been great, offensively at least. And so they have the Knicks at home. Then you get Golden State at home. You get one road game at Atlanta. But then Dallas Christmas Day. Then at Houston. Home for Wemby and the Spurs. At Oklahoma City on New Year's Eve. And then home for Boston on January 2nd. That is a rough next month of games. Minus those, I think it's 2 games in between that we don't have on the schedule yet. These games are super important. You have to be 10-10 when you go embark on that road trip next Wednesday against the Clippers. You cannot lose to the Clippers at home on Friday with the vibes where they're at now, and then to the Lakers on Monday. If they lose those 2 games, like I think I'm pretty good at avoiding being over dramatic about the dips and the peaks and valleys over the course of a season. I'm the first guy to say, hey, let's hang on a minute here. This is a 10-game stretch or whatever. But if they're 8-12 going on this road trip and they lose these next and they, get swept in a 4-game homestand, we're in trouble. Like if we're talking like play-in would be almost best case scenario at that point. Mathematically, that's not true. But in the Western Conference, it does get crazy. Like that's really kind of where we're at. And it seems so silly to put that much importance on games the week of Thanksgiving, but that's legit where we're at here. The Timberwolves right now are in 12th in the Western Conference. They're a game and a half out of the 10 spot in the West. They're only ahead of Portland, who they've lost to twice, Utah, and New Orleans. It's getting late early for the Timberwolves. Now, Pythagorean record would say they're actually 9-9, right? Because they've lost some of these close games that frankly they should have won. At some point, some luck will bounce their way. They've got a better point differential slightly than the Kings, Spurs, more significantly than the Lakers, Suns. Do I still think the Timberwolves are a top? This seems so crazy to talk about. A top, 8 team in the West. I do. Can I comfortably say they're going to be not in the play-in? I can't comfortably say that anymore. Like that's how bad this last, 2 weeks has gone for the Wolves. Is these are real questions that we have to ask and answer based on everything surrounding this team. Now, there's certainly some hope that the Rob Dillingham stuff turns into something real. I know he only played 5 minutes on Wednesday. I actually think the Clippers are a great matchup for him to get more run. I'd be shocked if the Timberwolves started him tonight, but he should get an opportunity to play more. This is a good matchup for him. We'll talk more about the Clippers matchup specifically here in a moment. But as the schedule gets a little bit crazier, more travel, etc., Chris Finch has got to look at expanding that rotation to 9 guys. He just has to. At some point, if these, I've said this before, they tried this like consolidate the rotation thing and get these guys familiar with each other, DiVincenzo and Randle, get them integrated before you expand it and get other guys minutes. And it backfired because they're 8-10 and they haven't gotten Dillingham and Minot and Shannon and these other guys minutes. So what are we doing, right? Neither thing worked. Neither thing happened. That to me is a big miss here for the first 6 weeks of the season, because now these guys haven't gotten their feet wet and your core 8 guys aren't playing well. So where do we go from here? All right, let's talk Wolves-Clippers here next. That's how we'll close the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. There is a game today on Black Friday, the game on Amazon Prime, I believe. The Chiefs are 13.5-point favorites at home against the Raiders, which I believe that's grown. I think it was 12.5 when it opened over on FanDuel. So go check that out. Of course, there's lots of NFL action on Sunday, per usual, although less because there were 3 Thanksgiving Day games and the Friday game. But there's lots of good action on Sunday as well. And of course, NBA tonight and throughout the weekend too. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's talk Wolves-Clippers. So last season, the Timberwolves actually won 3 out of 4 against the Clippers in the season series. Now, of course, the Clippers were nowhere near as good last year as they should have been. They've moved on from Paul George. The roster itself is worse than it was last year. And there's still the Kawhi Leonard, injury questions, and there's that's been a thing still. And then James Harden, of course, now a full season of James Harden. He's playing well for the Clippers. Last year, they beat them 3 out of 4. The only game they lost was in early March. It was when Cat was out, and the Wolves lost 89-88 at Target Center. I don't remember much from that game, but again, no Cat, and just lead at the box score. Again, the only game they lost to the Clippers. Kawhi had 32. Paul George had 15 on 16 shots. James Harden was 0 of 10 shooting in that game, had 4 points and 10 assists. That is, I do kind of remember that now. And then on the Wolves side, I'm sorry, Cat did play in that game. I guess that was right before the Cat injury. Cat had 18, 9, and 8 in that game. Gobert had 12 and 16. Ant had 27. But the Wolves overall as a team shot only 27% from 3. They made 9 threes total in that game, and scored just 88 points. But they won the other 3 matchups against the Clippers last season. The last matchup was March 12th, so it came just 9 days after that other one, and Ant had 37 in that game. That one came after the Cat injury. Cat got hurt in between those 2 games, or went out with the injury between those 2 games. Ant had 37. Conley had 23 in that game. Slow-mo started in place of Cat, had 10 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Nikhil had 28 off the bench in that game against the Clippers. And the Clippers had their big 3 all play in that game. Kawhi had only 6 points. He left with an injury. And Harden had 12. Paul George had 22. The Wolves won that game by 18. So looking at the Clippers so far this season, they're sitting here at 12-8. They blew out the 2-15 Wizards last time out. So congrats to them, I guess. No Kawhi, of course. James Harden's playing well. He had 43 in that win over the Wizards in just 32 minutes. Made 7 threes on 11 tries, got to the line 11 times, 18 and 16 for Ivica Zubats. Old friend Chris Dunn, Minnesota native and Golden Gopher alum Amir Coffey, both starting for the Clippers in that game over the Wizards. Now, when I kind of said offhandedly earlier that this was a game the Wolves should win, it's a good matchup. I said on the basketball party show on Wednesday, I thought the Wolves would beat the Clippers, and I didn't think it'd be particularly close. I know they're 12-8. And that I said some of that stuff before the loss on Wednesday night. The Wolves are favored by 5.5 on FanDuel. And there's a reason for that. Like, look at who the Clippers have beaten. Okay. I know they've won, 7 out of their last 8 or 6 out of the last 7. But look who they beat. They beat Washington. They beat Philadelphia. They had a nice win over Sacramento, but it was in the midst of the Kings losing streak. They beat a Paolo Banchero-less Orlando team. They did beat Golden State, and they beat Utah. So Utah, Philly, and Washington, 3 of the worst, 5 teams in the league are part of this streak. And then a Banchero-less Orlando team, a slumping Kings team, and then a nice win over Golden State. Before that, they lost 3 straight to OKC and Houston twice. The other teams they've beaten this year, Philadelphia, so they've beaten Philadelphia twice already. Toronto, who the Wolves, I know they lost to. They also beat him once. And then they beat Sacramento again, and they beat San Antonio. And then way back at the start of the season, they did beat Denver and Golden State. So a pretty up and down team. But this recent stretch for them has been all about the competition. The Wolves match up well against them. Besides Zubac, there's not a whole lot of size there to worry about in the paint. They need Rudy to step up. I know that we've said that time and time again. He played better, Tuesday, Wednesday than he had, but Rudy's got to play well in this game for Minnesota. The Wolves obviously have lots of length and bodies they could throw at James Harden. We know there's no Kawhi Leonard. We know that I think Norman Powell is questionable for this game. He's always played well against Minnesota, so that's kind of a key injury to look out for. Despite the Clippers' relative lack of size, they're a good rebounding team. They're actually 10th in offensive rebound rate, which is always a concern of mine for the Wolves. Is no matter where they rank league-wide in terms of defensive rebound rate, which right now they're middle of the pack, we know that they have these lapses. And for them, it's a lot of times those intermediate rebounds, right? Like along the free throw line, elbow, free throw line extended, which are essentially 50-50 balls. That was a major problem in the loss on Wednesday night, was getting some of those balls. The Clippers don't shoot a ton of threes, but James Harden, he's only shooting 34% from three, but he's going to get up 8+ threes a game. If Norman Powell plays, he's shooting 8 threes a game at nearly 49%. Again, he's questionable to play, but that would increase the number of 3-pointers that are put up on the rim by the Clippers. So the Wolves need to be ready to rebound against this team. The Clippers, of course, don't play super fast, so that's not a major concern. That transition isn't, although we've seen teams that generally play slower, like a Miami or what have you, decide to play fast against the Wolves because they know Minnesota struggles at times with transition defense. It's something that was much better last year than it was the year before, but we've seen kind of some of those old habits returning for Minnesota this year in terms of transition defense. So look for the Clippers to potentially push the pace when they get the opportunity. James Harden trying to get to the free throw line, of course, trying to get up some threes. Those are all things that we're going to see happen. And of course, the Clippers are pretty good at getting to the free throw line. They're more middle of the pack in terms of rate, but again, that's James Harden's game, right? It's free throws and it's 3-pointers. So, and he's of course 89% of the line. So, defending without fouling is going to be key, and then trying to protect the paint from Ivica Zubac and all of his offensive rebounding. He grabs over 4 offensive rebounds a game. Only one other player on the Clippers grabs more than 1 rebound per game. That's Terrence Mann, 1 offensive rebounds per game, which is a bit surprising, but he's good at the things the Wolves struggle with, right? Sneaking in and getting those loose balls, those 50-50 balls on long rebounds, which, by the way, that's another argument for Rob Dillingham. Dude's small. He's not going to grab a ton of rebounds, except for he has when he's played, right? Like he's gone in there and grabbed some of those, again, long rebounds, loose balls that are essentially 50-50 balls, and been effective doing that. I know like his rebound rate isn't very high, but like we've seen him in those moments do some of that. Again, it's the activity level. And that's something that I think Dillingham could bring to the table that the Wolves are sorely missing. And I'll say it again, Josh Minott, like if you need a dude to go in there and do some of that stuff, he's not going to score. And I know the offense has struggled, but if you just need activity level plus size and athleticism, like Nickeil gives you some of that, but Minott's a lot bigger than Nickeil. I'm not saying play him instead of Nickeil. I'm just giving an example of like there's another dimension to Josh Minott's game in terms of the size and the athleticism, the length that he provides that some of these other guys don't. I just think we're at the point now where it's time to try some stuff if you're Chris Finch. All right. I think we'll have a live postcast tonight on the Locked On Sports Minnesota channel on YouTube. Either way, I'll be back on Monday. We'll talk a little bit about this game from Friday, but we'll be, 2+ days past it at that point. But we'll talk about whatever happens Friday night. We'll get you ready for Wolves-Lakers Monday. We haven't seen the Lakers in 6 weeks since opening night. So we'll talk a bit about what they've been up to in that matchup on Monday. We'll talk some bigger picture stuff, too, to get you ready for the week. That's all I got for you today here on the show, though. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder of the newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and subscribe for your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage. Get it right in your inbox every day. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Sign up at LockedOnDaily.com. The Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.